Hello everyone, my name is John Michael Bushman and welcome back to Magic the Gathering. And this time around we will be looking at the first set that will be coming out early next year, and that is Foundations, which is the first of the, as people would call it, the Foundations era of Magic the Gathering, where we're basically looking at Magic the Gathering's face now than how it used to be. I've always posited that the flashpoint of Magic the Gathering has always been and will always be War of the Spark, where if that set had not happened, we would be in a completely different path than what we are currently on. It's been what, almost five, it's been 5 or so years now, since War of the Spark, and Magic the Gathering has changed, whether for the better or for worse. That is completely up to whoever you're talking to. For me personally, I definitely there are definitely parts of the direction that Magic has been going that I do not like, and there are parts that I do like. Especially with the current issues surrounding Magic the Gathering and Universes Beyond. As a lot of people have pessimistically pointed out, Universes Beyond is the death of Magic as we know it. But that, I think, is the key word there. Magic as we knew it is slowly but surely being replaced, and highly likely eventually is going to be replaced. WotC and Hasbro, by extension, has been focusing more on the gathering part of Magic the Gathering rather than the magic part these days. And yes, it definitely brings in a lot of revenue by bringing in a lot of newer people into the game, because, with Magic being such a niche within a niche in a niche, and in spite being the grandfather of all trading card games, it just doesn't have mass appeal. And Hasbro has basically found a formula that Magic the Gathering needs to be somewhat like Weiss Schwarz, where you would take multiple IPs and do it like on a quarterly or hell even monthly basis in Magic's case, and just pump out product and then drown the customer base until they can't consume anymore. There are definitely pluses and minuses to that, but there are people who are more well spoken than I am who can better explain what has been and will be going on for the next couple of years. And I'm honestly not too optimistic as to what in the route that Magic has been going through, but if it means bringing in new people, then all the more power to the people in charge. Of course, there will be parts that I won't like. There will be people who will definitely be put off by the older players. And I guess that includes me at this point. I've been playing since the tail end of Ixalan, basically around the release of Commander 2018, and I haven't stopped ever since. And I have seen, I was the game evolving is somewhat similar to me growing up, where I remember a time when I was still a wee young lad playing out in the streets, and then technology slowly and surely took over our lives, and everything changed, for the better or for worse. That depends on who you're talking to. And I guess you can say the same about Magic the Gathering. A lot changed within the last couple of years, and we're just gonna see where this ride will take us. I mean, worst case scenario, Magic the Gathering actually dies, but I highly doubt it given how much revenue the game has been making these days. The most out there thing that people have suggested is that if WotC keeps going down this path, they just might finally abolish the reserve list and completely nuke the entirety of the old guard of Magic the Gathering, and just keep bringing in newer people, and just push Magic in a direction that will no longer be recognizable from its. Well, we can definitely say that there are parts of Magic the Gathering story that are definitely not going to age well these days, but it's still history. And yes, you must not look at it with rose tinted glasses, because, those were the good old days. But look, to be fair, a lot of stuff, you cannot get away with some of the stuff they wrote way back when. But before that, lengthy tangent aside, we're gonna look at the common cards for the Pauper format here on the Foundation set. And I did learn a little. rather than looking at the whole of the set, especially for the commons in particular, I will only be looking at the newer cards. There are over 174 commons in foundations, and good god, I don't think I will have the energy to look through all of them right now. So we'll only be looking at the newer cards, and we're gonna see if they will be having an impact on the Pauper format. And also, to add to the tangent even further, Foundations is cynically being called the last hurrah of Magic the Gathering's core identity before it is wholly replaced by Universes Beyond. And oh boy, I can definitely see that. But again, like I said earlier, if this is what it takes to, keep this game alive, then so be it. I mean, I've the thing about me playing other card games, it has given me a far broader perspective than just quite literally sticking to one card game all throughout my life. Knowing that there is competition out there and actually playing with said competition, Magic still being the giant that it is, in spite of all of the negative feedback that the changes have been bringing, is definitely saying something. But without further ado, let's just get right into these 42 new cards for the Pauper format that are going to be found in Magic the Gathering Foundations. Starting off with Armasaur Guide, a 5-mana 4/4. I will stop myself right now. This is definitely just limited fodder. Move on to the next one with Dazzling Angel, a 3-mana 2/3 with flying. Whenever another creature you control enters, you gain 1 life. So, there is an entire Soul Sisters archetype here in the set, if you're going to draft it. In fact, we're going to get to it a little later with Hinterland Sanctifier, which I'll get to that when I get to that. And also Heir Apparent, we'll get to that when we get to that. Dazzling Angel will definitely go into the Soul Sisters draft archetype. There are a lot of strategies here that make creatures, and then whenever a creature enters, you gain another benefit. So Dazzling Angel will definitely fit into that draft archetype. But at 3 mana, probably more for limited rather than the actual constructed stuff. Definitely keep her in mind when you're drafting. Up next, we have Felidar Savior, a 4-mana 2/3 with lifelink. When it enters, put a +1/+1 counter on each of up to 2 other target creatures you control. Definitely a limited pick, especially when you're like searching for filler in your curve. But for actual Pauper, probably no. There are way more efficient tools out there that will give your board far more punching power. So definitely skip out on this one for Pauper. Up next, we have Fleeting Flight, a 1-mana instant. Great, another battle trick. Let's see what this one does. Put a +1/+1 counter on a target creature. It gains flying until end of turn and prevent all combat damage will be dealt to it this turn. So there's a way to just push through for damage or to get rid of blockers. But if your creature is sadly not big enough, even with the +1/+1 counter, then sometimes it's all for naught. So keep it in mind, at least for draft, but highly likely will not see constructed play. Maybe if only for the +1/+1 counter and the prevent all combat damage, because it's not indestructible per se. So stuff that says destroy target creature will still kill it, but at least red-based removal will not kill it. Up next, we have Heir Apparent, which, if you're not familiar, the Assassin's Creed set introduced a Knights Templar card, which has nearly the exact same text as Heir Apparent, but at least with Foundations, you don't need to buy the now extremely scarce supply of Assassin's Creed collaboration cards. Heir Apparent will be far more accessible than that, and to my knowledge, it's actually much better because when this little rabbit enters the battlefield, you create a number of rabbits equal to the number of other Heir Apparents. So if you have 3 Heir Apparents and you play this guy, you create 4 rabbits. So that's what, 8 power and 8 power across the 2/2s and then 4 power across the 1/1s. So you have an insane board by that point. Of course, barring any like breath weapons or fiery cannonades, you can make a very wide board very, very easily with Heir Apparent now. And I believe this set is also standard legal, so we're gonna see the amount of bullshit that this Heir Apparent is gonna cause in the formats that it will be legal in. So we'll just have to wait and see. I can definitely see some tinkering being done with this deck, especially if you add green to the deck that this guy is in. Oh boy, we can only expect more degenerate stuff with this guy moving forward. Up next, we have Helpful Hunter, a 2-mana 1/1 that draws a card on entry. I mean, look at that flavor text. Ah, the conquering hero returns. What trials did you face, little one? It probably killed a bird, my guy. And it's the flavor text attributed to Basri Ket. Huh. So this means that Amon Ket is still around, or this was way before Amon Ket was devastated by Nicol Bolas, because the lore behind Foundations is that this takes place just before everybody got displaced by, you know, the Phyrexians, or, you know, basically before the entirety of the universe went to shit. I mean, not that it already does every once in a while, but these are quieter times from what I believe, but I could be horribly, horribly wrong. I'll just have to look up the lore articles that this set produces, if at all. But Helpful Hunter, a 2-mana 1/1 that draws a card on entry. I mean, Spirited Companion does the same thing, but it's an enchantment creature. It's just the same thing. It's just not an enchantment creature. This will probably see play somewhere. I just don't know where. But keep an eye out for this cat as you're drafting your Foundations deck. Up next, Hinterland Sanctifier. Oh boy, they finally power crept the original Soul Sister by giving him one more butt. That sounds so wrong on so many levels, but being a 1/2 rather than a 1/1 means that it will survive far more than the OG Soul Sister ever will. This will definitely go into that kind of deck archetype because it's just a 1-drop, and Soul Sisters love their curve being very, very low, and I will not be surprised to see this guy being experimented on in some way or fashion. Definitely get 4 copies of this guy if you crack it from a box. Up next, we have Inspiring Paladin, a 3-mana 3/3. During your turn, this guy has First Strike. And then during your turn as well, creatures you control with +1/+1 counters on them have First Strike. So this goes well with the Felidar Savior that was shown earlier. But if you don't have stuff that has +1/+1, then he's the only guy who has First Strike. I mean, it's not bad, at least. 3 power in the draft is nothing to scoff at. It can trade with a lot of lower curve creatures, unless of course there's some there are battle tricks that your opponent is preparing just in case that actually happens. So keep him in mind. It's a middle of the road pick for me if I'm going to draft it, especially if there's like nothing else good in the pack. But otherwise, probably pass on this one. Next, we have Luminous Rebuke. I swear this card was in Bloomborough, but I guess this was new. This is new here on Foundations. Or it was downshifted from being an uncommon. I'll have to check on that. You know what? We can do that right freaking now. Okay, I have returned, and apparently this is a completely new card. I'm actually surprised this wasn't in the Bloomborough set. Okay, then. So a 4-mana, well, not even 4-mana, a 5-mana destroy target creature. I mean, you could just say less, but good God, it's one of those white removal spells where it just kills a tapped creature. Just stop. Just don't. This is more for draft rather than actual constructed. Just skip on this. Up next, we have Prideful Parent, a 3-mana 2/2 with Vigilance. When its creature enters, create a 1/1 white cat creature token. There are definitely Lion King references here and there already. Wait, hold on. Let's read the flavor text. One day, the future king will protect a pride of his own. For now, he defends his family from the terror of the swishy tail. This is just a Lion King reference. Don't talk to me about anything else. This is definitely a Lion King reference. You will not convince me otherwise. Let's move on to the next one. Next, we have Squad Rallier, a 4-mana 3/4, and it has a mana sync ability. Look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may reveal a creature card with power 2 or less, put it into your hand, put the rest on the bottom. I mean, yeah, it's a mana sync for a reason. If you don't have anything else to do with your 3 mana, you can just look for another creature, and then you just put it into your hand. It's basically a 3-mana draw-on. Of course, you need to spend the 4-mana up front first to put this guy onto the field. And I mean, he will survive a lot of removal, don't get me wrong. And since it's a mana sync ability, you can declare an attack with this guy, and then if he is being threatened with removal, then you can use the mana sync ability, if you have the mana left over, of course. Keep an eye out for this guy for draft, but for constructed, highly likely no. Next, we have Vanguard Seraph, a 4 mana 3/3 with flying. Whenever you gain life for the first time each turn, you surveil one. This is insane for the Soul Sisters archetype, especially for the draft format. So rather than just gaining life, you just filter through your deck, and that is insane because normally Soul Sisters decks don't have too much card draw and or card advantage. This is an insane inclusion in that deck archetype, but being 4 mana probably will not make it see play because from the builds that I've seen, they cap out usually at 3 mana and nothing higher than that. You'd have to be a very special case of insane if you're gonna go even higher than that. But for for draft in particular, this is definitely something that will be considered, especially with creature-based life gain being so prevalent. Especially with the first couple of cards that we've seen, and going with the curve of the 1 drop into the 3 drop and then into the 4 drop. It's definitely something to consider for draft, but for constructed, highly likely no. Up next, we have Big Fin Bouncer, a 4 mana 3/2. When it enters, return target creature and opponent controls to its owner's hand. This is definitely a really good tempo swing if you somehow manage to pull it off. It's very slow. 4 mana 3/2. It doesn't survive too much. But in drafts, sometimes that's usually more than enough. Of course, that is wholly dependent on the draft deck that you're building. But honestly, just pass on this guy, whether it be for draft or for actual constructed. Up next, we have Elementalist Adept. I don't even need to read the rest of the card, you guys. You guys can see it right there. This is what happens when Monastery Swift Spear is power crept. It's insane. I mean, granted, being at 2 mana, it definitely is a huge difference. But giving it flash and prowess, you guys, Watsy, you didn't have to ban Monastery Taylor Swift Spear, okay? And you give us Elementalist Adept instead. Granted, it dies to even more removal. Just a measly flick on the forehead of this student, and he will die of cancer. But just build a deck around this guy, please. I beg you. You will build a deck around this guy. People have already said that Izzet Skred will be alive again thanks to Elementalist Adept, and good god, oh my god, I will definitely see this guy played as a 4 of everywhere moving forward. Hard pass. Next. Up next, we have Icewind Elemental, a 5 mana 3/4 with flying. When this creature enters, you draw a card and you discard a card. I mean, it does something on entry, but at 5 mana, I think I'd rather be doing something else. So you're going to have to pass on this one in actual constructed. But in limited, probably something to consider, especially if you need something to fill out the 5 mana slot. So up next, we have Refute, a 3 mana counterspell, and then you draw a card and discard a card. I said no. Yeah. I mean, it's really funny that I'm not sure which designer. I'm pretty sure it was either a designer or some content creator where they were actually getting tired of the fact that basically every counterspell literally has a variant of the flavor text here. All of them basically say the same thing, and it's definitely starting to get tiresome at this point. They should have just given this guy lore instead rather than just giving the flavor text of counterspell instead. But I guess dead memes never die, so there is that. But a 3 mana counterspell with a draw and discard, that's insane, by the way. Casual more average powered EDH players are gonna want to have this card, especially if they have blue in their deck. In higher powered EDH, sadly, probably no. 2 mana has always been and will always be the gold standard. Will be not the gold standard, the minimum for counterspells in higher powered EDH. But in actual constructed, it'll probably see play more in standard rather than in higher powered formats, because in older formats rather, there are far more efficient tools over there. But something to consider definitely for constructed. Up next, we have Starlight Snare, a 3 mana aura, and it's another one of those paralysis style effects. Definitely skip on this one if you don't if you have like better stuff in your collection for your decks, but otherwise more for limited. Up next we have Strix Lookout, a 2-mana 1/2 with flying and vigilance, and then for 2 mana and tap, you draw a card and you discard a card. Another bird that filters through your deck. Something to consider more for limited rather than actual constructed, because there are other birds in the format that does what this guy does, but they just do it when they enter the battlefield, and then you can just infinitely blink them, well, quote unquote infinitely blink them, and for fun and value. But otherwise, probably not for constructed. Up next we have Uncharted Voyage, a 4-mana instant where target creature's owner puts it on top of the bottom or top of their library. All right. We're getting a lot more of these effects lately, where the creature is going to either be fate sealed or just buried at the very bottom of your deck. Of note, this is extremely devastating to happen in draft, especially because that's a huge loss of tempo. You would have to either draw the creature again or have some, or basically if it's put at the bottom of the library, you're highly likely never going to see that creature ever again. And there's even Surveil 1 for the person who casts this spell, so they will be even more prepared for the bullshit that you're going to do to them. But at 4 mana, probably will not see play, although I have been wrong in one of my previous Pauper overviews before, and I'm usually always wrong in my Pauper overviews. I just like spitballing for the Pauper format here, but it's my kind of fun. So there is that. But there was a 4-mana spell that was, I believe, in Modern Horizons 3 that I thought will not see play, but is apparently seeing. Well, granted, it's only seeing fringe play here and there in mono blue shells, but it's still seeing play, even if it's only fringe at that. So this having Surveil will probably replace that, because I believe that the previous spell only does the first line of text and nothing else. So this Uncharted Voyage might replace that. So keep an eye out for it moving forward. So we're at the black cards now, and first up we have Crypt Feaster, a 4-mana 3/4 with menace. Whenever this creature attacks, if you have 7 or more cards in your graveyard, this gets +2/+0 until end of turn. So this becomes a 5/4 with menace. If this were 3 mana, I would probably be very, very scared of it, but at 4, it's probably only more for limited, sadly. So you're gonna have to pass on this one if you're gonna make a constructed deck. Next, we have Gutless Plunderer. That is a very, very nice play on words, because, where are his guts? He's just a skeleton. But he does have Death Touch, so that already is horrifying. Why would a skeleton have Death Touch? I guess it's due to all of the meat that has slawed off over time, and now it's just a shambling skeletal structure. But let's see what the raid ability does. When this creature enters, if you attack this turn, look at the top 3 cards of your library, put one of them back on top and the rest into your graveyard. That is an insane amount of value. And you're gonna want to have this guy in your budget EDH decks, because all you need to do is to just attack, and then you just keep recycling this guy into and out of the graveyard. Of course, granted, you need to have attacked first before you can get his raid trigger, but who cares? You're just putting more stuff into the graveyard anyway, so you're gonna want this guy in your mighty crew, of course. But probably for other 60-card formats, highly likely no. Up next, we have Hungry Ghoul, a grizzly bear with a sacrifice outlet. Holy shit, this is a limited bomb if I ever saw one. Like, if you have nothing else to do, then you can just sack your whole board. Granted, if you have the mana for it, and then just either wipe out one creature in particular, because this guy's going to get blocked a lot in that draft format, and then just sack your whole board. What was that Ravager? The Arcbound Ravager style, yeah. But it's not a free sack outlet, so you need to have open mana to do the thing. But this guy will definitely be annoying to fight against in draft, so keep that in mind for that format. But for actual constructed, probably no. Up next, we have Infestation Sage, a 1-mana 1/1. Ooh, but when it dies, you create a 1/1 insect. And it has flying, so that is, you can sacrifice it to the Hungry Ghoul and just get an insect. Oh my god. will probably see play in draft, heavy play maybe, but in actual constructed, you'd rather just either mill cards or draw cards instead, rather than having another body. So pass on this guy, sadly. Up next, we have Sanguine Siphoner, a 2-mana 1/3. Whenever this creature attacks, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. So this is part of the small draft archetype in Foundations, where it's life loss and life gain. I'm pretty sure there is an Orzhov archetype already somewhere in the draft environment for Foundations, and people are actually already scared for one of the mythics that is in this set in particular, where it's a vampire that has one half of the exquisite blood sanguine bond combo, and the other piece of the puzzle is in Duskmorn, where it's an enchantment snake. So, although granted, it's a combo that you will see coming, because the vampire needs to deal combat damage first in order to do its effect. Unless of course you have some other way to make your opponent lose at least 1 point of life so that you can infinitely drain your opponent to death. But yeah, people are gonna start seeing the exquisite blood sanguine bond combo in standard of all places. So you'd better get. But the good part about it is creature removal is so goddamn good in standard right now that I am personally not too worried about that combo happening too often. And of course, there are also like a lot of aggressive decks in standard as well. So, with that combo costing 9 mana total, I don't see it happening too often, unless of course the Black X decks somehow muster enough removal in order to stay alive long enough in order to pull off the combo. But it's going to be a hope and a dream to get to that point. But for Sanguine Siphoner, she will definitely be going into that specific deck in particular as a support piece. But for other formats, highly likely no. Up next, we have Soul Shackled Zombie, a 4-mana 4/2. When this creature enters, exile up to 2 target cards from a single graveyard. That is already good enough. However, if at least one creature card was exiled in this way, each opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. So you only need to just exile one thing, and then there's like a 4-point life swing already. That's already good enough, and good god, that is insane for draft. But for constructed, probably no, sadly. It's 4 mana, a little too expensive. Although granted, Dark Ritual exists in the Pauper format, so you could probably cheat him into play there. But otherwise, probably no. But keep them in mind. Keep the zombie rather in particular in mind for constructed, because it just might see play because of the life point swing. Up next, we have Stab, and it does what Deadweight does. It's not an enchantment aura, so there is that, and the opponent won't have a window to sacrifice their creature in response to being targeted by an enchantment aura like Deadweight now. So Stab has effectively power crept Deadweight out of the format. Same with the Rabbit from earlier, which is a 1-mana 1/2 rather than a 1/1. So I can definitely see Stab seeing play in constructed decks moving forward, replacing the slot that Deadweight used to be in. Next, we have Vampire Soul Caller, a 5-mana 3/2 that flies. This creature can't block. When this creature enters, return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. Recursion in draft is always good. Sometimes treated as a last resort of sorts. But being a 3/2 that can fly but can't block, that definitely makes it more of a liability than anything else. But at 5 mana, that probably, yeah, you'll definitely have to skip on this guy for constructed. In draft, he will probably be like a very low priority pick. Up next, we have Courageous Goblin, a 2-mana 2/2. Whenever this creature attacks while you control a creature with power 4 or greater, this creature gets +1/+0 and menace until end of turn. Yeah, what he said. Yeah, I can imagine that's how he sounds when he says that. And he's called Courageous Goblin, but he's hiding behind the shoe of or rather, the foot of a giant. Because there's another giant in the background, as you guys can see there. So this is a giant that he is hiding behind, and I'm just realizing, this is probably a very big goblin if he's like nearly up to the shin of the giant there. So this is a huge ass goblin at that. Oh boy! In the goblin decks, there aren't honestly enough creatures that have power for 4 or greater, so he will only see play in the Goblin decks because he's a 2-mana 2/2. He's just a vanilla as far as they're concerned. But if it's for other decks, probably, maybe. But even then, the decks that could potentially support this guy are pretty tight for space. So why would you include what is essentially a vanilla in there? So more for draft, sadly, but even then, probably a low priority pick. Up next, we have Crackling Cyclops, a 3-mana 0/4. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, this creature gets +3/+0 until end of turn. Hey! Kiln Fiend is 2 mana for a reason. Skip on this guy, sadly. Up next, we have Goblin Borders, not Hoarders, a 3-mana 3/2 with Raid. This creature enters with a +1/+1 counter on it if you attack this turn. Split the skulls and split the spoils! Oh, that's Breaches! That was attributed to Breaches. Holy shit. I mean, it's just that. So it becomes a 3-mana 4/3 if you attack this turn. So maybe. But otherwise, probably no. Yeah, definitely probably no. Although, if you can cascade off of this guy using the boarding party, I mean, yeah, he's definitely gonna be worth it because you technically already attacked. Because of what boarding party does. So yeah, I mean, you can definitely do that, but otherwise probably no. Up next, we have Goblin Surprise, a 3-mana instant where you can choose one creature you control get +2/+0, or you create 2 red goblins. Did they just power creep Krenko's command? Did they just power creep Krenko's command? It's also a 3-mana spell that creates 2 goblins, and that was that. But this one not only creates 2 goblins, but can also potentially pump your whole board. That is insane. Oh my god. Or is Krenko's command only 2 mana? I don't quite remember. It's one of those two. It's a spell that costs 3 mana and creates 2 1/1 goblins as well. Oh my god. This is basically the power crap version of that. And the fact that I'm pretty sure it's either Krenko's command or Dragon's Father, if I remember correctly, because it's featuring 2 Tarkir goblins here in the art. And yes, I recognize Tarkir goblins anywhere because of their Yeti-like features, even though they're goblins. I mean, similar to the Ixalan goblins here, which look more like monkeys. These are definitely Tarkir goblins in Goblin Surprise. And, oh boy. Hey, your door's broken. Oh my god. I love the flavor of this set so much. But, like what I said earlier, Foundations is the last hurrah for Magic as we knew it. I'm gonna miss this so much. Let's move on to the next one before I get any sadder. Up next, we have Gorehorn Raider, a 5-mana 4/4 with Raid. When this creature enters, if you attack this turn, this deals 2 damage to any target. This is Reach. If you don't, basically, if you need it, if your opponent has a very gummy board and you cannot exactly push through for too much, this will definitely push you over the edge, even for just a little bit. But likely only for draft, not for constructed. Next, we have Incinerating Blast, a 5-mana sorcery which deals 6 damage to target creature. And then you may discard a card. If you do, draw a card. So 5 mana to do all of that is insane value for draft. Unfortunately, in actual constructed, there are far more efficient ways to go about this, and there's this 2-mana card in Duskmorn where it's I believe draw 2, discard 1, and then if you discarded the land card, you deal 2 damage instead. It's called Grab a Prize, and that is seeing play everywhere in Pauper right now. So good god, this is just not it. This is just not it, Chief. Let's move on to the next one. Up next, we have Sower of Chaos, a 4-mana 4/3 with a Menacing ability. Target creature can't block this turn. After a few minutes in the Cathar's attire, Vizrek started getting all kinds of new ideas. So the goblin that we see center stage here is named Vizrek, and yet he's not a legendary card. How dare you do this to us, Watsy? How dare you? He should have been a legendary card instead. But otherwise, this guy is just a draft filler even. Good god. Move on to the next one. Up next, we have Ambush Wolf, a 3-mana 4/2 with Flash. When this creature enters, exile up to 1 target card from a graveyard. So the fact that it has Flash and it exiles on entry, that is insane. This will I don't know if it will even see experimentation in actual constructed because a 3 mana 4/2 with flash is insane, an insane rate of that. And it's also graveyard hate in a format where the graveyard is treated as a second hand, especially with all of the flashback spells that are running around. I can definitely see this guy seeing some form of experimentation, especially with Gruul Ramp being one of the bigger decks in the format right now. Definitely keep an eye out for this guy because it's a flash speed and it's a creature as well. So you can say fuck you to negates at that. So keep an eye for this guy and also for draft as well. Good God, this guy's good. All right, down to the last 6 cards here, the 6 new cards out of Foundations. First up, we have Apothecary Stomper, a 6 mana 4/4 with Vigilance. When it enters, choose one, put 2+1/+1 counters on target creature control, or you gain 4 life. There is another creature that does what nearly does what this guy does, but only for 4 mana. So hi, unfortunately, no. And a walking clinic with a trumpet to sound its arrival. This is either in Selesnya or in Tarkir, but given their outfits, I'm pretty sure this is Tarkir. Because there are elephants in Ravnica, but they're more Loxodons rather than actual elephants. So this is probably Tarkir. Which now that I think about it, all of the Tarkir stuff that I've been seeing, at least in the common slot, is this a plant for the return to Tarkir sometime in 2025? I guess, but I'm just waiting for Lorwyn, god damn it. Let's move on to the next one. Up next, we have Beastkin Ranger, a 3 mana 3/3 with Trample. Ooh. Whenever another creature control enters, this guy gains +1/+0 until end of turn. So yeah, definitely a limited bomb. This guy can spiral out of control very quickly, and the fact that it has Trample means that it will always push damage through. All you need is just some way to get this guy, or rather to generate a lot of creatures very very quickly. And Elf Ball in Pauper is already like a deck that just simply refuses to die. And I am part of that problem because I play Elf Ball. And now that I think about it, this guy could like very easily slot into that deck because all he needs is just for another creature to enter the battlefield. Although granted, he is only at 3, it only increases his attack and it doesn't increase his toughness, so he will die to a lot of things. But who cares especially if you like somehow manage to get 50 elves into play, so he'll get +50/+0. So who cares if he dies during combat? Like, he's going to trample over everybody with 50 points of damage anyway, so who cares? I will definitely add this guy into my elf deck because he has trample innately, and elf decks in Pauper have always had to like jump through hoops in order to add trample to their creatures because any one blocker will be more than enough to stop an elf kill turn from happening. And this guy having trample all by himself is a godsend. Although granted, there is an enchantment aura in Modern Horizons 3 that also grants trample, but we're gonna see. I'm gonna experiment with this guy in the Pauper format and see if he is worth a slot in the elf deck. But otherwise, probably maybe no. But at least keep an eye out for him. Up next, we have Cackling Prowler, a 4 mana 4/3 with Ward 2, and it has Morbid. At the beginning of your end step, if a creature died this turn, put a +1/+1 counter on him. So he grows at an insane rate. All you just need are creatures dying. And he has Ward 2, so he's very, very hard to kill. Good God, I can definitely see this guy being very, very annoying to deal with in the draft environment. God. This guy, if I play draft with this and this guy lands in front of me, I'm just gonna concede because good God, I do not want to go face to face against that guy. That face is gonna be the stuff of my nightmares for the next couple of days. Up next, we have Elfsworn Giant, a 5 mana 5/3, and it's not an elf, sadly, it's a giant. Although granted, it's just Elfsworn, so and it's in the flavor text as well. He upheld his vow to the elves by watching their woods and blazing their trails, and he has a landfall ability. Whenever a land you control enters, create a 1/1 elf. And has reach. I mean, I think it's to be expected that he has reach. It's not surprise reach like a bunch of the other stuff that is commonly seen in the Pauper format. But because he can literally like you can see that there are birds flying like around his waist, so he's definitely big enough to reach creatures that have flying. So there is that. But landfall, unfortunately, in the elf ball deck, sometimes playing with one land is usually more than enough, and they can even bounce that same land like into and out of play, and then they can somehow generate like 15 mana in spite of everything. So there is that. Definitely skip out on this guy, sadly, for constructed. Last two cards, three top snare spinner, the obligatory spider for the draft environment, 4 mana 1/4 with reach and death touch. And then you put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. Activate only as a sorcery. Definitely a good support piece for the +1/+1 counter archetype that is in this draft set, but otherwise for constructed, no. Up next, we have Quick Draw Katana, the only common equipment in this set, surprisingly. And then during your turn, equipped creature has +2/+0 and has first strike. I'm surprised that this does not have flash, given that it's called Quick Draw. But I guess that would be way too broken if it were at that. But first strike, I guess, is the closest thing you can have to having a flavor win for the word quick draw. But otherwise, this is just a combat trick if I've ever seen one. So definitely pass on this one for actual constructed. And that is it. The 42 new cards that will be entering the Pauper format coming out of Foundations. I'm definitely going to be experimenting with a lot of the green cards, especially with Beastkin Ranger. But I will definitely not be surprised if I see some of them see play somewhere. Especially, I mean, Elementalist Adept in particular is definitely going to see play somewhere. Good God, and so will Hinterland Sanctifier. But apart from that, yeah, a lot of this stuff is will likely see experimentation somewhere. But we're just gonna have to wait and see until that day happens. So we're gonna cut it here. And if you guys like what you saw, hit like, comment, subscribe, and share this among your friends. And until next time, toodles.